Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of Finding the Frame. We have the amazing cinematographer Mandy Walker ASC, ACS here joining us to discuss everything career, creativity, and her latest project, Elvis. How is it?
Hi, good. Hi, good to be here.
Thank you so much for taking some time. I know that you have an amazingly but busy schedule with everything that's going on for the nomination season. How has that been so far?
Pretty exciting, actually. I mean, for me, first time being nominated for the ASC, the BSC, and BAFTA, and I won an award in Australia for the at the Australian Academy for cinematography for this film. Was first woman to win ever, so that was pretty exciting. And so I'm just really busy but enjoying it.
Well, congratulations. We are very hopeful for more nominations. I know there is one in particular that we're really excited about, but everything that you've done with Elvis, and obviously you have an amazing career, which we're super excited to talk about, but we're super thankful for all that you're doing for filmmaking because it's awesome to see.
Thank you.
Something that is particularly interesting, which I was talking to you about, is just Australia as a country is arguably one of the best filmmaking countries that I've seen. On Finding the Frame, we've already had, I think, more than half of our guests have been Australian. And I just want from your perspective, I mean, you have some of the greatest directors, cinematographers, even actors come out of this country. What makes Australia such a powerhouse, do you think?
I don't know. I know because relatively we have quite a small population, about 24, 25 million or something. I think filmmaking has been part of our culture for a long time, and I think, we were talking about that. I'm reading a book about the McDonough sisters, who I knew nothing about, and they were directing movies in the early 1900s, feature films, and were part of the first wave of cinema in Australia. And so I think it has been around for a really long time. And I think also Australians are really always kind of, art is a very important part of our lives. And so, I mean, as I was growing up, I was always introduced to galleries and photography and movies. They were great movie-going public as when I was growing up. So, yeah, it's always just been part of us, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's a level of what's the word that I want to use? Prestige, but almost expectation anytime I see, because I love a lot of the directors, particularly that come out of Australia. And it's something about like the grit or the personality that's embedded within the culture, I think makes for really strong storytelling. And I'm never let down, especially in the episodic television. I feel like Australia is very tight in that regard.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
I know. I don't know what it is. And cinematographers.
Oh, yeah.
John Seal and Russell Boyd and Peter James and Dean Semler and there's just so many that I felt were doing great things when I was growing up. And so they were the people I was looking up to.
Absolutely. Well, let's go into a little bit of your background, where you started. I was doing some research and I read pretty early in your life you knew you wanted to be in film and specifically a cinematographer. You worked in, I think, your local high school's TV station. Also, you were a very avid photographer. I would love to hear from your perspective what that period was like in your life and also how it shaped you as an artist.
Well, I think it started for me. My mum was a painter. Not professional at all, just did stuff for herself and drawings at home. So she was always doing things like that. And she took me to a lot of art galleries. And as I was saying, I went to the cinema from a really early age. And then when I was in high school, my dad built me a darkroom in the backyard in a shed. So I was doing my own black and white photography and developing and printing. And so when I was about 13 or 14, I sort of put two and two together and said, well, I really love films and cinema and I really love photography. It just seemed like a natural career for me to go into. And storytelling, I love storytelling. I was a great reader. And so then I did go and do work experience at a TV station. And when I went in there, they said, when I was about 15, and they said, well, we don't have girls on the camera here, so you maybe better think of something else. And I just sort of ignored that and thought, well, I don't really understand that, so I'm going to keep going. And then I eventually went to college, and I was doing like a humanities course and doing a a cinema kind of critique kind of course at night, and one of the teachers there said, I was talking to him and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd love to be a cinematographer and I don't know how to get in the film industry. And then he said, well, there's a friend of mine who's making a feature film. I'll give them a call and maybe you can get a job being a runner. And I did, and I got the job, and I left college and I was 18. And then I just sort of, every time I was on set, I spoke to the people in the camera department and said, hey, guys, hi, this is where I'd love to be, and can I watch what you're doing, and can I talk to you about it? And then from then on, one of them recommended me to someone who was making a documentary, and then I started actually, first off, I was doing work on feature films as a runner or a third AD, and in the meantime I was working on some documentaries for nothing, and some that were being done on the weekends, or music videos, and I sort of learnt that area of filmmaking, and then I became a loader and a focus puller and an operator, and started shooting my own stuff over the next few years. So it's a sort of, I learnt a lot on set by being an assistant, I think, and watching other DPs work, and watching I think the important thing I gained from that was about the relationships, and to see how the set worked and what everybody's job was, and how they collaborated together. And that was a really great part of my education, I think.
And I love your story particularly, and there's no right or wrong way of obviously navigating how to enter in the film industry. If you can get in and you do it one way and that works, that's amazing. But I love yours. We have a lot of people who do the very traditional route, which that's also great. I'm a big advocate for academia. I love, I think there's something to be said about structure, but similarly to you, Shane did something like that where he started as a grip. Yep. And I also do think, especially for a cinematographer, those that get to start within the trade, maybe not at the top, like head of department, but can see how the department works, being a runner like you were. I think that's really strong for when you get to the point to be a leader, to know what the expectation is for everybody. Yeah. And it's really nice to be able to hear your journey. And you were in a particularly for, just like representation, which was unfortunate. You wanted to be in film and you were working at the TV studio and you were told no because you were a woman. And I bet probably at the time there wasn't a lot of people within reach that you could look to that were probably following a similar path, right?
No. In Australia, I think it was much like here. There were hardly any women in the camera department at all. There was one woman who had shot something, Jan Kenny, and I went and met her and had a cup of coffee with her, and she hadn't done a lot, but she'd had the opportunity to do one small feature film, and I spoke to her about it. But I think I just kind of powered on and just ignored it, really, And, there was a few times where, when I was a loader mainly, where people would question my ability and strength or whatever, and I just kind of ignored it and said, I can do this, and did it. And I didn't make a big deal about it, and I was always really positive. And so after a couple of weeks, they'd sort of forget that it was strange that they had a woman in the camera department, and I was just treated like everybody else. It's
pretty cool, and I don't know where I saw this, but I saw some photos of you when earlier in your career that are just really awesome. And I don't know if there's a place where you could direct people to see what some of those are, being on set. But you just had some very awesome BTS from back in the day that I feel like not a lot of cinematographers at least publish that I've seen. So
I think they're on my Instagram.
Maybe it was your Instagram where I saw them. So definitely check out her Instagram because they're really awesome. But going back to the just cinematography itself, obviously you fell in love with it, or filmmaking really in general, at a really young age. But speaking about cinematography, what did you latch on? What made you want to go down specifically that path? Was there something that really stood out to you?
Well, I think it was going to the cinema, and also, when I was in high school, my dad used to take me to this place called the State Film Centre, and they showed a lot of foreign language films, and they had a big impact on me, actually, because it was the storytelling of people from other cultures and other countries, and the difference that the cinematography made in telling those stories, and how what I was learning about place and and culture from those films, and how it affected me. And I thought that it wasn't just Australian stories that I was watching things from all over the world, and that to me was really interesting. And that was kind of the thing that I think pushed me into actually that job, you know.
Do you have any films from that time that you really recommend or that resonated with you that you were watching?
There was one Spanish film that I watched. I think it's called Spirit of the Beehive.
Oh, Spirit of the yeah, by Victor and Reese.
Yeah.
That director, I'm so glad that you brought that up. That film and El Sur are like two of my favorite films of all time.
Really?
And the way that he directs child actors.
Yeah.
Is crazy. I've never seen anything like it, and I love the cinematography. I always recommend both of those movies because they're just master classes in subtlety, in composition,
Yes.
and they're so beautiful.
Yeah, and the lighting. I mean, they obviously didn't have a lot of money, but it's so beautiful, and it was so... I felt like I was in a beehive, you know, watching that film, and you know, I remember just sitting there going, why is this working? Why is this so great? And then there was films of, like, I was obsessed by anything that Robbie Mueller shot, and that was when I was very first starting as well. So he was a big influence on
The American Friend.
Yeah,
It was so
in
good.
Paris, Texas. Incredible.
Amazing.
And also just Wim Wenders films in general, and
the whole German New Wave and everything during that period. German cinema in particular. I know a lot of people talk about French New Wave, but there's something about like New German that I think is just exceptional in the filmmaking style and the cinematography. And they're both like so good, and each wave is so good because of the way that it interprets cinematography. But there's something about German filmmaking that is just absolutely mint. So.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It did have an influence on me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess as your career started to progress, obviously you latched onto it and you knew you wanted to go down this route regardless if people believed in you or not. You were going to figure out a way. When did it start to click that, aha, I can do this? Was there a specific project that you were brought on as the cinematographer? What was the big next step in your career?
Well, as I was working on films as an assistant, I was also getting together with some of the other crew members and doing music videos, or if a friend who was at film school needed someone to shoot their film, I was doing that in my spare time. And that was really important to me, and that was how I think I learnt a lot of things by being able to kind of test things and do crazy things for music videos and work out what worked and what didn't. And also shooting documentaries. I shot a documentary called As the Mirror Burns in Vietnam. I think it was like 1990 or something. It was a long time ago. And that taught me how to expose film, because, again, like in those days when I first started, it was only film. There was no digital shooting. And all the films I was working on were shot on film. And I went away on this job, and there was me, the director, the producer, and the sound recordist. And I had no assistants. I had two little, what were called redheads, little 800-watt tungsten lights in a suitcase. And but what I did was I got to work with available light, and I saw no dailies for the whole time, for 5 weeks. So what it did teach me is how to expose by thinking of the image and trusting my gut and understanding. I did some tests before I left, so, you know, I was looking at the film stock and saying, well, the sky's going to be blown out here, and this is how dark I can go in the shadow. But I never saw anything. And then when I got back, everything was fine. And I thought, well, okay, I get exposure now. And it's funny because, you know, we're talking about before this started about the transition of film to digital. And I still shoot digital like I shoot film. I approach it in the same way. I learnt the zone system before, when I was learning how to expose, the Ansel Adams zone system about the grayscale. And that's how I look at an image always. And it helps to create 3 dimensions by using tones and colour, of course, and then lensing. And, you know, there's a lot of ways to trick your eye. But that was a really important part of how I learnt.
Yeah, you can always, and it's not to say that people that haven't shot film can't be extremely talented as a cinematographer, but it's always interesting to see those that are working today that have the opportunity to be in the industry before it was a digital format predominantly, then was met with the transition and how they have adapted, like yourself. Because similar to me, I started out on film, and I feel like the perspective that it gives you when capturing an image, especially knowing that, all right, it's going to be delivered in 2D, but there is a 3D element to this. And I feel like film, looking through the lens, not looking at a monitor, not looking at a plane, you get to understand that dimensionality more. And like Michael Cimino, the director, he always talked about it being the ballet. So anytime I make a movie, I'm like, yeah, it's a ballet, and there's things that I have to like capture in front of me, even though it will be delivered 2D. But I want to hear more about that. What were some of the challenges when you saw the industry shifting? It was becoming potentially more profitable to shoot digitally. Was it hard to figure that out at first, or did you just take it on head first?
Well, I was not one of the earlier adapters of shooting digital, and the directors I was working with also were not. So by the time, I think my first digital movie was, I can't even remember now. I think it was The Mountain Between Us, was it? Anyway, because I shot Australia on film, and
you did Hidden Figures on film as well,
I did Hidden
right?
Figures on film, yeah. I think for me, it was commercials. Commercials were the first things I shot on digital, and it was great because I got a chance to kind of look at it in different situations, and because commercials are always really, each one's very different to each other, and work with a lot of different directors. But I'm glad that I went to it at that time, because I didn't want to be part of the experimentation of the early part of it, where I thought, well, this doesn't look as good as film, and why am I using it? And to me, I didn't want to do that. And I know some people did adopt it really early and were part of the development, and give feedback and see the limitations of it at the time, but I didn't want to do that. So I didn't want to use it until I felt it was almost, in a place where it could do the right job for the movie and not compromise.
Yeah. Is there something that you like about digital that you weren't able to do with film?
Yeah, it's about seeing the image on set. Now we have fantastic monitors. Being able to be with the director and be very specific about the way it looks, and know that what you're seeing is what you're going to get in the end. And because the thing about film, I mean, I learnt in a time where in Australia we didn't have colour timing in our dailies. We would just have a one light work print, which means you do a test and say, I normally overexpose by 2/3 of a stop on negative. And then I'd print it down for the dailies. And if I got the exposure wrong, nobody was writing that or adjusting it. Where I know in the States they had colour time dailies on pretty much most films. And so if I made a mistake, I saw it straight away. So I got very disciplined in knowing the limitations of it. And so I was glad that I got to do that. And then now I'm very happy shooting digital. And I mean, I think there is a lot of things you can do to make it not look exactly like the last film you saw, whereas we used to shoot different film stocks and push it and pull the negative and cross-processing and negative also when I started, when there was Agfa and Fuji and Kodak and there was black and white and there were two different black and white. There were options, and it really changed the way the film looked. And now you're doing it more in a manipulative process.
Yeah, you don't quite have the options like you used to with film, but now with digital, you have all of these cameras, which are all relatively really good now.
Yeah.
We're not in a place like it was earlier in the digital era where, okay, I really like the look of an area camera, maybe not so much red or whatever it might be, but now they're all really like strong cameras, and it's a matter of the cinematographer bringing their skills to the table
Yes.
now, lighting, which is really awesome. Now, going back to your career, I love how you've done a lot of like commercials as well, not just feature films. And something that's interesting with you is how you've balanced going between a feature film, a narrative project, and a commercial. Could you talk more about how you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, I really like doing commercials in between doing movies because it means that, one, it's like I don't have to take a film for financial reasons. Also, I get to work with different directors, which is fun, and I get to meet directors, and some of them which I've gone on to work with on movies. And also, there's a lot of variety and it's quick, and I learnt, how to light cars and something that I probably wouldn't have learned on a film. And I like it for that reason, and like being able to move between the two. I mean, I used to shoot music videos too, which I don't anymore. I haven't done one for a really long time.
Yeah.